My name isn't really Michael Turner. I've changed it for privacy reasons, but what I'm about to share is something that truly happened to me. I'm 34 years old, born and raised in El Paso, Texas, and I served 8 years in the U.S. Army. Most of that time was spent overseas, but the one memory that never leaves me, the one that still follows me into my sleep, didn't happen on foreign soil. It happened right here in the United States, at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. It was 2017. My unit was assigned to a 2-week training exercise in the old part of the basin area that most soldiers avoided. They called it Echo Field. It had been decommissioned for decades, full of sealed bunkers and cracked concrete tunnels left behind from the Cold War era. Some said the place had a strange history, but no one really talked about it. The first night was uneventful. The second night was different. A heavy storm rolled in from the east, and we were ordered to shelter inside one of the older underground bunkers. The air was already thick with humidity and rust, and once the storm knocked out the power, only the faint red emergency lights flickered along the corridor. Everything felt colder, tighter, and unnervingly still. During my early morning watch, I started hearing noises. At first, they were subtle, like a faint knock coming from deep inside the wall. I ignored it. But as the minutes passed, the sound became more deliberate, more measured. It wasn't random anymore. It was rhythmic, almost like a slow heartbeat echoing through the concrete. The smell came next, something metallic and sour, mixed with the scent of wet earth and rot. It spread through the air vents, making my throat tighten. I swept my flashlight across the corridor, tracing the sound until I realized it was coming from the old sealed section of the bunker door that hadn't been opened since the 1960s. Every instinct told me to walk away, but I couldn't. The vibrations under my boots grew stronger, traveling through the metal floor panels, pulsing like something was alive beneath us. I remember standing there, frozen, trying to understand what I was hearing. It was as if someone or something was moving behind that welded steel door, trapped in a space that shouldn't exist anymore. When the engineers inspected the bunker the next morning, they decided to break the welds and open the sealed section. What they found inside wasn't a person, but the remains of one. A single skeleton, still dressed in pieces of a decayed uniform, lying beside a rusted rifle. His dog tag was still legible, a lieutenant who had been declared missing during a Cold War training exercise in 1963. The entire section was sealed again after the recovery team left, but that night, when I was alone in my quarters, I could still hear it, the same slow, steady tapping, coming from somewhere behind my wall. I've since left the service. It's been years now, but there are nights when the air goes still, and I swear I can feel that same vibration under the floorboards, like something is still there, deep below, waiting to be heard again. That's where I'll end my story. If you've made it this far, thank you for taking the time to listen. I hope you share it on your channel, so others might hear what I went through. Some echoes fade with time, but not this one. My name is Daniel. The name I'm using isn't my real one. I'd rather stay anonymous, but everything in this story really happened. I'm 29 years old and originally from Denver, Colorado. I served for years in the U.S. Army as a communications specialist. My time in service was mostly routine, nothing that stood out. But one mission, in particular, has stayed with me ever since. It happened during a winter training exercise in 2019, somewhere deep in northern Alaska. The assignment was simple: test our endurance and communications equipment in sub-zero conditions. The location was remote, an abandoned radar site left over from the Cold War. Surrounded by endless snow and silence, the nearest sign of life was miles away. Our small group was stationed near the edge of a frozen plateau. There were two portable huts, a failing generator, and a rusted steel watchtower that used to support a radar dish decades ago. The structure looked unstable, but we used it anyway to mount one of our antennas. The cold was unforgiving, the kind that froze your breath before it left your mouth. I was assigned night duty to monitor the radio systems. The first few hours were quiet, just static and the hum of the generator. But close to midnight, I started picking up something strange. Faint pulses of static, short bursts, uneven, almost like Morse code, but with no recognizable pattern. At first, I thought it was just interference from the storm, but the rhythm was too deliberate. It came in intervals like a signal struggling to break through. Then, after each sequence, the wind outside would pick up, almost in response. It gave me a feeling I can't quite describe, like the signal and the storm were connected somehow. Through the narrow window, I could barely see the tower, coated in ice and snow. But for a few seconds, I thought I saw a dark figure at the top platform. It wasn't moving, just standing there, against the wind. The rational part of my mind told me it was the antenna swaying, but my instincts disagreed. By morning, the generator finally gave out. I climbed the tower to check the wiring. The metal steps were frozen solid, and the sound of my boots echoed through the empty frame. Every breath I took came out as white fog that instantly vanished in the wind. When I reached the top, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The railing and floor were covered in handprints, bare human handprints pressed into the frost. There were dozens of them, some large, some small, all scattered in different directions. The pattern led toward the broken radar dish at the far end, where the frost had melted away in streaks that looked dark and old. The smell up there was different too, not just rust or oil. There was something else, something faintly sweet and rotten, like decayed meat that had frozen and thawed over time. I didn't stay to investigate. I fixed what I could and got down fast. Later that week, the tower was marked unsafe and sealed off permanently. Nobody mentioned the handprints, and I didn't bring it up either. Some things are better left unspoken. Still, even now, when I'm alone during a quiet night and the wind begins to howl, I swear I can hear that same static pulse in my head, a faint signal, coming and going like something still trying to reach out across the airwaves. That's all I can share for now. If you ever post this on your channel, thank you for giving it a place to be heard. Some things that happen in uniform never make it to paper, but they never really leave you either. My name's Sergeant Kyle Henderson, but that's not my real name. I'm 32 years old, born and raised in Wichita, Kansas. I served in the U.S. Army as a medic for nearly 6 years. Most of my time in service was routine drills, field exercises, deployments that blended together after a while. But there's one experience that stayed with me ever since, something that didn't make it into any report or logbook. It happened in 2016 at an old military hospital that had been reactivated for training. The facility sat in the middle of the Nevada desert, miles away from any populated area. It used to be a testing site back in the 1950s, but the Army repurposed it for medical simulation and emergency response exercises. We were told the place had been cleared, sterilized, and inspected. That was a lie. The building was massive, 5 floors above ground and 2 more below. Most of it was empty except for a few active wings. My team was assigned to stay overnight on the 3rd floor, right next to a sealed section marked Ward 17. That wing had supposedly been off limits for decades, but for some reason, it was reopened just a few weeks before we arrived. From the moment we stepped in, something felt off. The air was dense and cold, the kind that clings to your skin. The lights flickered no matter how many times maintenance fixed them. There was also a faint smell, dust, antiseptic, and something metallic underneath. My shift started at midnight. I was reviewing logs in one of the patient rooms when I noticed a faint, steady sound above me. Breathing. Slow, deep breathing. It came from the ventilation duct, and it wasn't mechanical. I froze, listening. The rhythm changed: inhale, exhale, pause, as if someone was trying not to be heard. When I stepped into the corridor, the lights flickered again, and for less than a second, I saw a tall, motionless figure at the far end of the hall, facing my direction. The light snapped off. Silence. When it came back, the hallway was empty. I headed for the exit, but one door caught my attention. A metal isolation room, barely open. The number plate read 17B. The floor inside was covered in dust except for one clean outline, shaped like a human body, and faint reddish streaks leading toward the door. I didn't investigate. I just closed the door, walked out, and never mentioned it again. Later that week, one of the officers mentioned Ward 17 used to be a containment unit for Cold War experiments radiation, sensory deprivation, psychological testing. No surviving records, no names, just rumors that some patients never left. Since that night, I've had the same recurring dream standing in that same hallway, hearing those slow breaths behind the vent, and knowing that whatever was there is still there. That's where I'll end my story. If you ever decide to share this on your channel, thank you for letting me tell it. Not everything that happens in service gets written down. Some things just follow you long after you've left the uniform behind.